Good evening, visitors. Welcome to the Australian War Memorial's last post ceremony. My name is Robert Allen, and joining us today from the Royal Australian Navy is Commodore Jan Wiltshire. We welcome the veterans who have served, those that are still serving, and the families that love and support them. The live stream of this ceremony is made possible by the Returned and Services League of Australia and the RSL and Services Clubs Association. We welcome members who are watching the broadcast of this ceremony across Australia. During this evening's ceremony, wreaths will be laid at the base of the pool of reflection by visitors to the memorial. If you're able, I invite you to please stand and join in singing the national anthem. Those requiring a seat, please be seated. The Australian War Memorial was the vision of Charles Bean, Australia's First World War official historian. Bean landed with the Australian troops on Gallipoli and stayed with them at the front through to the end of the war. The idea of this national memorial and museum came to him at Pozières, France, in the depths of the bloody fighting of 1916. Bean's idea was that this would be a place where families and friends could mourn their loved ones buried in faraway places. It would also be a place that could help all Australians understand what these men and women had endured and what they had done for us. Bean's vision, to which we remain true, is best expressed as inscribed in the entrance to the memorial's galleries. Here is their spirit in the heart of the land they loved. And here we guard the record which they themselves made. Tonight, we'll read the story behind just one of those on the Roll of Honour, which lists the names of more than 103,000 men and women who have given their lives for us in war and on operations for more than a century. But first, we present a lament, Flowers of the Forest. Wreaths or floral tributes will now be laid at the base of the pool of reflection.
Today we remember and pay tribute to Corporal Leslie James Fisher. Leslie Fisher was born in 1894 in Winslow, Victoria. Affectionately known as Les, he was one of 10 children born to Henry James Fisher, a dairyman, and his wife Elizabeth, who worked as a nurse. Les grew up in Melbourne, the suburb of Camperdown, and attended the local state school. He found employment as a tanner and was living in Footscray when the First World War broke out in 1914. Les Fisher joined the initial rush of men seeking to enlist in the Australian Imperial Force. Owing to problems with his teeth, however, he was rejected 5 times before finally being accepted on the 30th of July, 1915. He was assigned to reinforcements of the 29th Battalion and went into training camp alongside his older brother William. The 2 brothers embarked for active service together from Melbourne in October 1915, sailing on board the troop ship Demosthenes. After spending several weeks at sea, Private Fisher arrived in Egypt, where he continued training alongside the other new recruits. In early 1916, following the failure of the Gallipoli campaign, Fisher was transferred to the ranks of the 14th Battalion. He embarked from the Western Front with his new unit in June and arrived in the French city of Marseille after a 6-day voyage. From there, he was sent north to the Franco-Belgian border, entering the trenches in an area dubbed the Nursery Sector. Over the weeks that followed, Fisher was promoted to Lance Corporal, while he and his comrades undertook training, as well as short stints in the front lines. In August 1916, the 14th Battalion was sent south to the ruined village of Pozières to relieve the men of the 1st Division, who had been embroiled in bitter fighting there since July. There, Fisher and his comrades endured heavy shelling and regular raids, living under conditions frequently described by the troops as hellish. In August, during the fighting around Mukai, Fisher was badly wounded by shrapnel, which tore through his scalp. He was evacuated to England for treatment, where he remained for several months. Fisher rejoined his unit on Christmas Eve 1916, returning to the trenches in the midst of a bitterly cold winter. In March 1917, Fisher again was promoted, rising to the rank of corporal. Soon after, German forces began a strategic withdrawal to the fortified Hindenburg Line. Their retreat drew the Allies into a desperate pursuit, which resulted in multiple bloody clashes along the front. Their withdrawal eventually halted at the enemy's new front line, near the French village of Bullecourt. Fisher's unit was drawn into the fighting there in April, where the Allies attempted to break through German lines at Bullecourt, suffering more than 3,000 casualties in one day. Having survived the carnage at Bullecourt, Fisher was briefly hospitalised with tonsillitis in June, before being sent to England, where he was attached to a training battalion. He saw out the rest of 1917 there and rejoined his unit at the front in early January 1918. By the end of the month, however, Fisher was again suffering from tonsillitis and was evacuated back to England. On arrival, he was admitted to hospital at Dartmouth and later Weymouth, where he underwent treatment. It was discovered that Fisher had been suffering from ongoing headaches at the site of his head wound from 1916. He was also affected by insomnia. Doctors noted that he was underweight and anemic and generally appeared very unwell. In May 1918, Fisher boarded the ship Geica and returned to Australia, having been found permanently unfit for active service. On arrival in Melbourne several weeks later, Fisher was admitted to the Caulfield Military Hospital. He received treatment there for several weeks before being discharged from the AIF in September. Though still suffering the effects of his wounds, Fisher returned to civilian life and gained employment as a labourer. He married Alice Jane Klotz before the year was out and was living with her in Kensington when the armistice was declared on the 11th of November 1918. Over the years which followed, Fisher's condition worsened. In May 1920, he was readmitted to the Caulfield Hospital to undergo further treatment. Doctors operated on Fisher in July, hoping to alleviate some of his suffering. He was returned to the wards after the procedure, but died soon after, on the 2nd of July 1920. Leslie Fisher was buried on the 5th of July 1920 at Brighton Cemetery. He was 26 years old. His name is listed on the Roll of Honour on my right, amongst almost 62,000 Australians who died during or as a result of their service in the First World War. His photograph is displayed today by the Pool of Reflection. This is one that many of the stories of service and sacrifice told here at the Australian War Memorial. We now remember Corporal Leslie James Fisher, who gave his life for us, for our freedoms, and in the hope of a better world. They shall grow not old as we that are left grow old. Age shall not weary them, nor the years condemn. At the going down of the sun and in the morning, we will remember them. Lest we forget.
Lest we forget. We leave you this evening with the words of the memorial's founder, Charles Bean. Many a man lying out there at Pozières or in the low scrub at Gallipoli, with his poor, tired senses barely working through the fever of his brain, has thought in his last moments, well, it's over. But in Australia, they'll be proud of this. Ladies and gentlemen, girls and boys, that concludes the last post ceremony. On behalf of the director, staff and volunteers, thank you for visiting the Australian War Memorial today and for your continued support during the Memorial's development project. We wish you all a very pleasant evening. Thank you.